Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
You are watching a Fact TV presentation of the Town of Westminster Select Board Meeting.
We're going to call the meeting of the Westminster Select Board to order 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, May 10th. Any adjustments to the agenda? All right, acceptance of minutes, April 26, 2023.
I move to accept the minutes of the Westminster Select Board as printed and presented for Wednesday, April 26, 2023.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the minutes of April 26, 2023. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Communications and public comments. Seeing none, we'll move on to unfinished business. So we'll continue our law enforcement discussion, and Sheriff Mark Anderson is here to chat with us about options and what we can just have a discussion, I guess. We might as well just start.
No problem.
Do you want to start, or do you want us to throw questions at you? I mean, I filled him in on the fact that we were discussing potentially hiring our own officer or a constable with law enforcement authority or something like that. So he's aware that's kind of in our minds a little bit.
So, I mean, I can start briefly. So Mark Anderson, I guess I'll just start. I know that you're talking about different things. That's fine. We do one-year contracts with towns for a reason, allows you flexibility. If you're not happy with our service, that's fine. I'd like to continue contracting with Westminster. I'd like us to go back to the arrangement we had with Putney. Putney's interested in doing that. That was the Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 at night, which gave access to both the towns for the same amount of money. So basically a regional policing concept. The complaints I've heard from the board, I think, are reflective of not having that service. At the end of the day, it's possible. We were doing it. I think part of the transition with the former town manager, there was a gap in communication of what was and what wasn't. And at the end of the day, if you want to explore that, I'm happy to talk about it. If you want to explore other options, we won't be offended. Happy to answer any questions in any direction you want to go.
I was under the understanding that, I appreciate your time tonight. I was under the understanding that last time we spoke, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was still a personnel issue, meaning that you as well as everyone else was still having difficulty finding qualified personnel as well, and having enough people staffed for both the sheriff's department. Even when we spoke with Bellows Falls, they were having difficulty. I'm not even sure that if they're still shorthanded, but can you address that? That was what I thought, right?
So not in the last year.
Okay.
Now, what I may have relayed was that while we're full staff for our current obligations, we've had significant increase in demand. So we have more communities coming to us saying we want more policing. We're not staffed for that, but we haven't signed those contracts. So as we do have personnel come in, we're just engaging them off. So to the point, if Westminster said, we're good, we're just gonna move the resource elsewhere, but it does create a delay if Westminster were to come back later and say, we want it back.
If we were to do that down the road, or something in-house, would your department still be willing, or would you be willing to provide, what was Trevor calling that? Like an intermunicipal agreement, like he said some like dispatching services, which I don't know if you do your own dispatching, I'm assuming. If for some reason you were to arrest somebody, we don't have a place to hold anybody. And I realize nothing is free, but is that something, or would it be like, well, you're on your own, good luck with that?
So the devil's always in the details.
Yeah,
So we do provide 24/7 dispatch. That's built right into the contract we offer for the services we provide.
Right.
If you were to go with your own service, we also provide regional dispatching for other agencies. What we do with that is we tie into their infrastructure to dispatch for them. I do have some infrastructure that covers Westminster already, so that might not really be as much of an issue, but it would be somewhat different than the arrangements we currently have. So when we talk about dispatching, I want to be very clear that we're not just talking about the person who answers the phone and talks on the radio. We're also talking about towers, licensing, all the backhaul, that there's a lot that goes in behind the scenes on dispatching.
Right.
So would we be willing to talk with the town about providing that? Absolutely. In terms of facility, if you need a place to go for an arrest, surely we have relationships with any police department or law enforcement agency where they can come to our office. We don't have a holding cell at our office, that's intentional, because the regional correctional system's designed to just accept them. So why pay the additional cost? Why have to follow the rules with the U.S. Department of Justice? Deal with juvenile regulations around detention of juveniles. There's a variety of complexity to detention. So
Not simple.
I'm just opting to avoid the complexity
That makes
there. And I would encourage the town to do the same. And
Don't arrest anybody.
I wouldn't encourage that. There are certainly ways that you can address when someone's broken the law, they get arrested, they get processed. But that said, you do need space. Is it realistic to take a person into custody, drive to Brattleboro to process them? That might make sense. It might be cost effective to do that. In our cars, we've invested in technology to be able to process a lot of people roadside. We can't do that with impaired drivers. We have to, there's equipment located throughout the state that we have relationships to be able to do that. You can certainly establish those relationships yourself, but there is a lot of details to all of this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I'm just curious, and sorry, my headache is getting really bad. So when you're saying if you pulled over an impaired driver, drunk driver, you don't take that person into custody?
No, we do.
You do?
They just don't.
I'm saying those are an example of people we can't process roadside. We have to take them somewhere. So we need what's called we'll call it a breathalyzer. It's called a DMT.
Where
It's
do you
an
take
entry test. We could take them to our office, the Westminster Barracks, Bellows Falls PD, Brattleboro PD, literally any police department that has a system. Part of the agreement of getting the system is you open it up to other people.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off that tangent.
No, I want to make sure I'm communicating clearly, so I'm glad you asked the question. And at the end of the day, those systems do require testing. They require regular maintenance, so if they go down, I mean, Bellows Falls would be ideal. If it's down, it's down. Westminster's ideal. If it's down, it's down. And sometimes 2 or 3 will be down at the same time. So having them dispersed throughout the county is very...
Has impaired driving gone up a lot in the last year, or has it pretty much stayed the same?
I don't have that exact statistic. We know that alcohol consumption went up. We know that marijuana consumption went up. So I would hazard to guess that it has increased, but I don't have the data on hand.
Is it a similar, and again, forgive my ignorance, because I'm just, again, you mentioned public safety. So with the advent of legalized marijuana, is the test a similar test? What is it?
Nope, so there's no presumptive breath test that you can do for marijuana.
Okay.
And so we use what's called a drug recognition expert. So our deputies are trained to recognize impaired drivers. There are specially trained officers throughout the state called drug recognition experts who would then come in and provide a clinical evaluation. That's based on a whole body of research, and they're available through the Governor's Highway Safety Program.
Thank you.
I've heard that, don't fill me in on this one, but I got it right. You did so many hours of patrol in Westminster, but there was other patrolling done by some kind of governor's safety program. So you were actually here more hours? Could you fill it, because I talked to one of your officers and I didn't get the whole details of that, so I was just curious.
So I'm gonna give 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is what the relationship that we had with Putney and Westminster before this current contract, which was we contracted with the 2 towns. It was for the same amount of money, for the same number of hours. But we said regardless of where the on-duty deputy is, they'll respond to either town. We have our current contract, which is for 20 hours. That has no relationship with any other town. And so just the 20 hours we're here, the 20 hours, or the remaining 148 hours, we're not. And so then you would defer to the state police. Regardless of the two contracts, and for both years, we've operated what's known as a Regional Highway Safety Task Force. That's a federally funded grant, which we manage. It provides one full-time deputy, and it also engages all of the area law enforcement agencies to target specifically traffic safety. So that is not paid for at all by the town. Property tax, what that is federal funds that come through NHTSA that target impaired driving, distracted driving, and work zone enforcement. We also provide one education program that also helps with teen driver safety programs. So that's an educational component, but I think we have somewhere to the tune of about $200,000 of grant funds that come into the towns with nothing on your back.
And we also heard the other day about ticketing.
Yes.
So we were kind of curious about that because the way you code your tickets,
Yes.
we're like, we're watching, we have a guy sitting on Route 5 when we don't get to see them as much money as we do, so.
Yeah, so first off, let's talk about ticketing broadly. There's two places the money will go. One is to the state's general fund. So the ticket gets written, it gets processed through the state of Vermont, and it just ends up in the state's coffers.
Regardless of who wrote the ticket.
Regardless of who wrote the ticket. The second place it will go is the municipality if it's written under, I'm gonna guess roughly a dozen statutes. So some of those are speed related on municipal roads. Some of those are municipal ordinances, one-way streets, and a couple other things, which I'll come back to that one in a second. You can enforce truck weight limits. So those are the three that I'm most familiar with. We've worked with the town of Westminster to ensure that your ordinances adopt all the municipal roads. So when we write a ticket, we code it off to the municipal ordinances where possible, so the town gets the money. We worked this is about, I'm gonna guess 2018. Don't hold me to the date, but we worked with the town manager and the select board to adopt all the stop signs. So that's another ordinance that the town can adopt, and so you can collect funds off of that. Come 2020, and I know that all the towns saw impact by this, come 2020, because of COVID, we stopped, this was statewide, we stopped far fewer vehicles because we wanted to limit the spread of COVID. And that was through a variety of directives throughout the state. And what we found is coming back out of it, I think it's roughly 1/4 of the traffic stops are occurring right now that used to occur in 2019. That's a statewide issue. We actually just did a project with, I'm trying to remember the name of the organization, but they work with the Federal Motor Carrier, the folks with the Federal Motor Carrier on commercial vehicle stuff, and they worked with sheriff's departments across Vermont because we're actually the ones with the least dip in traffic stops. But still, I can say without question, ours dropped too. Our traffic stops in fiscal year 2022, so this was July 21 to 22, were half of what they were this year. And just for comparison, fiscal year 22, we had twice the amount of hours or it'll just be easier to say twice the amount of hours to do that work. This current contract year, we've done more than double in the 20 hours. So we are acknowledging like it's gone down. We are identifying various areas that needs to come back. So the life cycle of a ticket, we issue a ticket, the person has roughly 3 weeks to respond to the ticket. If they decide to say, I'm guilty or no contest, I'm gonna pay this, that goes to the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont through the court administrator's office ultimately issues a check to the town of Westminster. There's a report that they issue each month that says what the town received for tickets they process. We also provide a report for the town which you can correlate the ticket numbers that we've issued to the ones coming back. So all of that just happens with the town. We see none of that. I've actually been before this board before to say, be careful with using ticket funding as your revenue source for this, because eventually there is a decline in the revenue, and when you plan just on ticket revenue, eventually dries up and you say, well, what are we gonna do? So we always say, allow that to be like a happy side benefit, and not the plan for your public safety funding.
I know that Putney has contracted for 40 hours for next year, correct?
Correct. Oh, they've authorized the budget for
Yes.
40 hours. We
Yes.
haven't signed the contracts yet. We're starting that next week roughly.
Okay, all right. Yes, Karen had said that she was very interested in discussing what we had done previously.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it worked well. We had started that relationship with Westminster and Putney intentionally. The geography's right, populations are right, and the relationships were right. So it seemed to be the model that the town wanted. What transpired, I mean, I think we can learn from it. But at the end of the day, everything I've heard you talk about, whether you provide your own service or find service elsewhere, we're talking about the same thing. And my initiative is we need better rural policing in Vermont. I'm starting a separate, unrelated to this conversation, I am starting a conversation with all the towns in Windham County where I'm using a more eloquent problem statement than this, but I'm gonna say it this way. Rural policing in Vermont sucks. It just does. I've been testifying with the legislature this session to talk about how are ways we can improve some of these systems. That is a continued conversation we've been a part of for 15 years, probably longer, but at the end of the day, we're continuing those. Right now, I think the legislature is more willing to talk about it. And so what I'm pushing forward is a system with town's input that says, how do we improve rural policing in Vermont? That could be municipal police departments, that could be the county sheriff, that could be the state police. I don't care. I just want to fix that problem statement. Because the towns are the ones who are ultimately hurting for it right now.
I think a lot of the frustration with the board and with town hall is when we call, or have called in the past for something specific. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but we're met with, you're out of hours. Even if we're out of hours, I feel like it still should be responded to and then reflected in the next week or the next month, like, okay, we went over this month, but we're under this month, it'll all wash out in the end. And I think that's where some of the frustration comes from in the communication breakdown. And you're right, when the town manager left, there probably was a gap there. But now you lost me, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I think there's a communication breakdown there for sure. And I look at it, this is just my personal opinion, I look at regional, like what they did with the schools, right? They combined all these schools, whereas we just went through and got our school back.
Yeah.
And I think if we had, just my personal opinion, if we had our own person here, we can control where they go to a degree. We can, if we have complaints on this section of road, we know it's bad, we focus there. If we have, God forbid, something large come up, we can call for services from somebody else surrounding and kind of work together versus outsourcing it all regionally. That's just my opinion.
Sure, so
And actually, sorry to cut you off, but after talking with the VLCT person, that actually sounds feasible. To me, it does. I'm sure there's other costs and things hidden in there that we'd have to wade through them, but.
yeah, so just rough numbers, if you're talking about a police department, you're probably looking about $300,000 a year operating cost. That's not including your capital costs, by cruisers, radio infrastructure, and even that's if, let's say you contract with me or someone else who provides radio, you're still talking about the radios in the car, 6, 8, 10 grand, depending on the system you're trying to integrate with. There's a variety of expenses to police departments.
Oh, for sure.
VLCT, I don't know if Trevor mentioned this to you, what VLCT's been seeing statewide is a decline in police departments because towns are falling behind on being able to afford them. So that's where VLCT's actually been working with sheriffs, not to say they have a public position on this right now, they may not, I don't want to speak for them, but they're working with sheriffs to say we need to support regionalized policing. There's studies going back 70 years on providing regional services and properly resourcing it. Towns often do go with the police department because they want that local control. So this is where what I'm trying to do is split the difference to say, how do we have regionalized funding and resources with local control? So the project I'm working on also takes governance into account, but we're not talking about that for this current contract if we were to contract. I call the contract model the 60% solution. It's good enough, it gets the job done, but there's 40% of unhappy people. And I think that we've identified some of them over the last year. To your point of, hey, we're out of hours for the week, we've been out of hours for the week for a while. In fact, we've exhausted the entire town's contract. We're still continuing to provide service. We're eating that actually. And I have ways to make that work, but at the end of the day, I checked this morning, we had 1 hour left for the remainder of fiscal year 23. Part of that is because we would get called, we'd come in, and so we were working on average 30 hours a week on a 20-hour contract, and at the end of the day, people had an expectation that the service was available the same way it was last year. And we were trying to be responsive to calls, but as we got halfway through the year, we realized this is untenable. So can the town make a significant investment right now? Sure. Happy to work with you on that, but we have exhausted the budget.
So what would you say to get a decent amount of, what should we be budgeting?
So
We
I
just-
think you've already budgeted it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the question becomes, what do you want to authorize? I'm recommending the 40-hour arrangement, and then we work with the town of Putney to build up the same relationship we had. I understand you've authorized more funding than what that would cost. I forget the exact dollar number off the top of my head. I tried downloading it, but
The 40 hours, is that
Yeah.
what it's $104,000.
that sounds right. So that's what I would recommend. If you want to use the additional funding the town authorized to do more, whether that was pick up some weekend coverage, or if that is to start working out your own service. I mean, those are possibilities. But that would be my recommendation if the town wanted to contract with me.
So I'm kind of new on the board here, so one of the things I heard about the previous board members was it worked really well when we knew we had the same officer who was doing both Putney and Westminster. Is that something that you guys can?
You build a relationship. with
Yeah,
them.
yeah, and I think that's what I was hearing. It's like, we don't know who we're getting. It's one guy this week, and I understand, staffing's hard.
So
But-
ideally, that's
yeah.
the model we run. The problem is because law enforcement agencies around us are short on staff, they try to recruit from me. I just had one deputy who was recruited away. I was fortunate enough to backfill his position very quickly. Had another one who was being recruited rather heavily. This is what we're dealing with right now. So when I say that I'm full staff, it's great for me, but then I'm also becoming a target to other people around us who say, we're not full staff.
Yeah.
That's what I asked when I opened up, because that's where we've always come back to, is a staffing issue. Last thing I'll say, because I've been here the longest, which is scary, right? I pretty much think you've done a pretty good job. The usual complaint is, which is always is, no one really knows on the visual deterrents where they were, especially when you were present. And I would simply suggest, if we go this route again, which I'm willing to do, because I think when I communicate with the taxpayers, they want to see visual deterrents, especially on the roadway. Like when I asked you, and you did, I want to really thank you. When I asked you about School Street, you immediately put up that little thing, and there was a buzz about it. But you know what? They slowed down. There's a school there, right? And I'll just point out, as everyone has said, you could park, if they saw you, for example, the most dangerous spot up here clearly is station marking. They blow, you have 3 diamonds on the ground, you've got a yield sign on the air. They blow right through that. But I've almost been hit there like 3 or 4 times. My point is, we wouldn't get the kind of blowback we get if the visual deterrent is there. Because then you can't say, well, we never see the sheriff. Because for me, I can't speak for everyone else, that was the main complaint from not my peers here, but my fellow citizens. Where are they? And this is not a small town, you know that, it's a big place, right? And this is not just Route 5, you got a lot of things to look at. So I'm just saying from the visual deterrent standpoint, if you go back that way, I think we get a lot more bang for the buck if like you're visible in that area for a particular period of time, so the folks know that you're there. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me. One of the things, and so to answer the question, where are they? We've inherited a lot more call volume from the state police as they've been short-staffed.
Okay.
And I mean, when we talk about police work, it's not just being visible. There's a boatload of paperwork that follows.
Sure.
So, I mean, at one point I got a complaint from someone saying, my deputy was at the fire department. I said, okay, and what's wrong? Well, they're sitting there on their computer. I said, okay, what's wrong? And they said, well, they were just sitting there typing into the computer. I said, were they doing paperwork? And sure enough, they were doing paperwork for an arrest that had occurred from the day before. And that's part of it. I'll take a DUI just because it was my skill set when I was on patrol. One DUI would take about 4 hours of paperwork.
Wow.
There's a lot to it.
Right. And that's all part of the process, but you have to explain to them that would have been helpful too, like a town meeting where you'd say, hey, look, you know what, I pulled one person over for drunk driving. That's 5 hours off the contract, right? 5 hours right there. One.
Out of only 20 hours.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So
So that's hard for us. And so
yeah, I got it.
we're also triaging some of these calls to say, okay, what needs to be addressed immediately and what can wait?
One quick
Or
question.
what did the state police take care of? Or
Let me ask you this
whatever it
though.
may be.
Let's assume you're at like a choke point there, where, I'm just telling you, where they're breaking the rule 20 times every 6 hours. I think it's even more. So if you nail 3 people or 4 people there, for running a yield sign, I don't know what you give them. But that's not gonna take 5 hours, right?
No, a card stop takes about 10 minutes.
Right, and
If with a ticket resulting, about 8 minutes, 6 to 8 minutes with a warning resulting.
then there is a court date, right?
Nope,
There is a
not
date.
unless requested by the operator.
Got it, okay.
I didn't mention that because there was a question about traffic fines, and this is an important caveat. So the person who pays the ticket right away, that money will trickle back to the town within, let's say, 60 days. I don't know the court's immediate process, but roughly 60 days. The person who contests the ticket, they have, so they'll contest the ticket. It takes usually about 2 to 3 months, depending on backlog, for it to go to the court. Let's say the court finds them guilty, then they have another number of days to pay the ticket. So until it gets to that point, so we could be 4, 5, 6 months down the road, before that ticket money starts coming back to the town, the person who doesn't pay the ticket at all, that person will then have their license suspended, and until they pay the ticket, that money doesn't come back to the town either. So the town only will receive what the state actually receives, and until the state receives it, you won't see it. There's also a formula, and I would encourage you to talk to the town's attorney if you want to know the formula. But at the end of the day, what I usually say or tell towns is for a rough, gross, very rough number, assume it's 60% of the eligible tickets the town will take back. There's a surcharge that comes off, there's a percentage that comes off to cover the state's assets into the entire system. So that's why you won't see the full ticket amount come back to you. But that's all the state doing its processing, running the judicial bureau and the clerks that process the tickets, the mail, all the things that go into the administration of it.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting to just tag drivers for the sake of tagging drivers. I'm simply pointing out that in my time here, I gotta speak to the folks, my fellow neighbors and taxpayers. That's the biggest thing I've always heard. Presence, and then how many tickets are written.
Sure.
So I'm just, to me, that seems like that's kind of resolved in a couple of the choke points pretty quickly because.
Yeah, so I wholly agree with you, the station market is high violation area. Coming off the interstate's a high violation area. Back Westminster Road's a high violation area, School Street. I mean, there's, Usually any street that's under 30 miles an hour is always gonna be a high violation area, just because people feel it's too slow these days. But to that point, visibility in those areas, I wholly agree. But as we're getting pulled away to cover more investigations, it's also hard to have that visibility.
Understood.
So
Thank you,
we can certainly work on that though, if we continue here.
thank you.
What, thank you.
Oh, I know, yeah, I know. I have so many notes. So say we don't have a plan come the end of our contract, what's our options? I mean, I know there's the do nothing, but
There's always do
that is not an acceptable answer.
Well, I think taxpayers
Well, correct.
want something done.
Yes,
regardless.
yeah, doing nothing is not an option.
Yeah.
So, what are our, without signing another contract that we're not sure we want to do, what's our, do we have an option or not?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, so we don't send our contracts out until usually about May. So we're coming up to the point, yeah, literally next week, I'm working with my office manager to get them sent out. Sometimes we'll send them out a little earlier, sometimes it's a little later. It's been wonky because of COVID, and so towns, I still have a couple towns that are having a town meeting in May. So that's what it is. Options for Westminster in terms of my department or in general, I guess?
I think in terms of your department to start with.
Sure, so we can negotiate the hourly contract. That's the same thing that we're doing right now. If more hours makes sense, fine. If it's the same amount of hours, fine. We can work with Putney. I think that the town of Putney would be open to going back to the original arrangement.
They are.
I
Yeah.
briefly spoke with the town manager in Putney back at town meeting, just saying, if this is even in the cards, are you interested? And she said, absolutely. Not to say the town of Putney's committed to this, it's certainly the relationship we build, but it seems like a very viable thing. I mean, I send my rate letter to the town each year, which says anything under 2,000 hours a year costs this, anything over 2,000 hours a year costs this. So you have a range. You can go to 0, you can go to 100. It doesn't matter to me. We're going to continue the regional policing discussion regardless of whether we contract with the town of Westminster. We'd like to ask the town of Westminster to be a part of it. And that's unrelated to the contract, and that's just a social initiative I identified and said, we can work on this.
And, well, obviously, regional policing isn't happening now, but if regional policing happened later and we had our own officer, could they intertwine
So Vermont is,
somehow?
you may have heard about this from Trevor. Vermont is a flexible state when it comes to mutual aid. Fire departments generally have very strong mutual aid throughout the state and throughout the regions. We're very similar. We don't codify them in agreements, whereas if we go to New Hampshire or Massachusetts, they have to establish an agreement to do it. Vermont just doesn't. So, I mean, I work with the state police, I work with Bells Falls PD, I work with Brattleboro PD. We all recognize that there's not enough rural policing, in some places even urban policing. So if the town of Westminster established its own policing service, we would continue mutual aid with the town of Westminster. But what that looks like, we'd have to talk about.
Is there a cost in the mutual aid end of things?
Usually, no, not to the town. So part of our current contract says that we can build in mutual aid to other areas. So let's say that I have a deputy sitting out here on Route 5 and Walpole has a pursuit with a homicide suspect. And so they move towards Walpole. Maybe they're on the south end of Bells Falls. The person crashes the car in Bells Falls. Our contract currently allows us to go into Bells Falls and assist.
Right.
So the town of Westminster would pay for that through our contract. But that said, the frequency that happens is low.
Right.
And so we are able to manage that rather rather easily. So is there a cost? Yes, there's no free lunch, but is there a realized cost? Not really. It's not like you get a bill.
But it's not a contractual thing, mutual aid in Vermont anyway. It's just a handshake kind of deal, and we just,
Pretty much. And there's nothing that says we couldn't codify a contract.
I just would assume there would have been.
Yeah. The towns or the states around us do, but we don't. And part of that's because Vermont has, all law enforcement officers in Vermont, except for constables, have statewide law enforcement jurisdiction. So that's why we really don't need to, whereas Massachusetts, they're sworn in all the towns in the county. Because once they step outside of their town, they are no longer a law enforcement officer in the next town. So all the towns in the county in Massachusetts just swear them in, and so then they have basically the same ability, but with a lot more bureaucracy.
I can't think of any more questions that I have, because I've talked to you already, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything will happen overnight
No.
by any means, but I think we should.
Yeah, and there's a meeting in Rockingham, the
Yeah,
There-
tri-board meeting.
tri-board meeting at the end of the month to discuss policing. So, we'll keep in touch,
Great.
for sure.
Did you send a rate sheet out yet? For this
It
coming?
came in November.
Yeah, I have it at home.
Okay, I thought we had seen one, but I just couldn't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but I know 40 hours is 104,000.
Be $52 an hour and $62 an hour. I just couldn't multiply those numbers in my head when you're asking the number of hours.
Gotcha. Great,
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
bet.
you.
thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you work with any towns that have constables?
Most of the towns I'm familiar with that had constables have lost their constables. Most towns in Windham County have eliminated the law enforcement component of their constable due to liability concerns. And then training is a tough aspect for constables. Usually where constables are successful is when someone's retired or already has a full-time law enforcement certification.
So it can be successful.
It can be, yeah.
But if they have their law enforcement certification, they're essentially an officer. The town just hasn't given them the title. Or
So-
if they have kept their certification up to date.
Yeah, so certification and authority are two different things.
Right.
But certification, usually where the programs are successful, they have a certification already.
Right.
And so then when they become employed with the town as the constable, they don't have to figure out how to get the training. That's usually the big gateway that's a struggle for towns trying to set up a constable program, is that they can't get access to the training because they don't have a certified training officer, because constables are limited to the office of the one person. And there's a lot of certifications that go with it now that didn't go with it probably since 1970s. So constables were larger before the 70s because the certification process was non-existent.
Yes, Jim?
Mark, how flexible are your morning hours?
Under what circumstance?
I'll say between 5:30 and 8 on back Westminster Road, when it's 8,500.
Well, we can certainly, we can work our contracts to cover that.
Because I just talked to Jason, not even 3 weeks ago, I was just waiting for the bang, but if two guys didn't go by my house doing 90, they weren't doing nothing.
Yeah. No, back
I was late
Westminster,
for school at VA.
back Westminster Road's always had a chronic speed issue. We've done a lot of work out there. So to answer your question, how flexible are they? Under our current model, they would be very flexible. If we were to talk with Putney and Westminster, we'd be trying to set fixed hours so that there's some clarity for the towns to know when the service is available versus when the state police will be coming. So if we have the set hours, that might be a little harder, but with the town having some surplus funding, that might also be an opportunity to do that. And then completely unrelated to the contracts, we do have the highway safety grant funds. And so those are very flexible. And that's all data driven. So we focus on high crash areas. So if back Westminster Road's a low crash area.
Crash areas, just had one the other night.
If it were a low crash area, that day they wouldn't show up, and so we wouldn't target it, but if the crashes are showing up, then we target it.
So, some of what I've heard is like, it was used to be, you guys would stop in at town hall, and when you had a regular guy, and then we could say, yeah, we're having problems over there. I think that's kind of thing that, what I'm seeing is like, there was some breakdown of communication on both sides.
I would like to see that
And,
back.
yeah, we'd like to see that back, and then, you know, just to, you know, stop in, you know? We understand that, you know, you guys are staffing as you're going through guys, and it's hard, but that would be really helpful, because then we can say, hey, we're having problems here, and I think that communication breakdown is what, some of why you're here, and what's going on, is what I can see.
Sure. I agree with
So,
that.
we'd like to, let's improve upon that, and, whatever you can say there, like, hey, we'll do it, you know, that would be hugely helpful.
You know, I mean, we're problem solvers, always have been. So I'm happy to work on anything. I'm not a miracle worker, but I think that when we can have genuine conversation, that's usually where we solve a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
So happy to work on that. And
Yeah,
whatever the board's decision, I mean,
Yeah,
we're still your county sheriff. We might not be providing law enforcement services to the town without a contract, but we're still here. So there's no love lost. If you choose to go a different direction, that's fine. That's, again, why we have a 1-year contract. At the end of it is the end.
Okay,
good?
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
thank you, Mark. Okay, so I put the 5-year capital plan on here, mostly because it kind of fell off the radar. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it.
No, those are mine.
I just kind of wanted to take some sort of an action. Like, do we want to look at these buildings and see what these buildings need, so we can either address what the buildings need in the upcoming budgets, or decide to do something different, or try to help us come up maybe with a purpose or a use or something, but I wasn't quite sure.
We need to break down,
Right,
each of us needs to go check a building out.
Yeah,
Well,
great
so-
idea. If everyone takes,
Talk
if everyone
about it,
takes
we
one,
can
yeah.
do it, just
Or the-
everyone takes a building,
Yeah.
right, or
Great idea.
go in,
Perfect.
another option is we can have a meeting at a building. We can have a select board meeting at a building. And, because it's summer, you don't need heat. I mean, AC is nice, but it's not the end
yeah,
of the
we can do
world.
that too.
And then we'd all see it, and yeah, we won't have Zoom, but not a requirement.
We have done site visits in the past too, where we start a meeting, say at the North Westminster Community House.
Right,
You check it out, you walk through, you look at it, you come, unfortunately, you have to come back here,
right.
open the meeting up, and that would be
That
part of
would
the
work,
event.
then we just bring it into our Wednesday.
Or you could do it there, I don't do,
Right.
just throw
We
it.
just start our meeting half an hour early or something, put it on the agenda.
Yeah,
People wanna show up, they can show up at the building.
so.
I think then, if we did that, we would all get the same information
at the
in the
same-
same,
I agree.
Right,
That's
when somebody points something out, everybody sees it, instead of the next time
And
somebody goes
people in
in.
the
they may not.
public that care about the building probably show up
Will
too.
come
and-
anyway.
And then we come in.
correct,
This is what it needs.
yeah.
Then we put a dollar sign next to it, and go to each building at the end, we go look, say, hey, we
It's
got so
probably
We go,
much
oh my
money.
God.
This is gonna take so much, or we're gonna have to do it over so many years.
It's probably gonna stagger everybody, because, I mean, just like this building alone, we put a ton of money downstairs,
Right.
but you sit out in the front, the paint is falling off, the trim is rotted, I mean, like,
Right.
We
walls
just
are
painted it not too long
yeah,
ago.
it,
How long ago was the paint?
old stuff needs a lot of
2014.
work.
Was it that long ago?
Oh,
9
When I
years.
started.
that's longer ago than I thought.
Yeah, it is longer ago than I
But
thought.
still, all the other buildings essentially don't have a budget, and if they do have, it doesn't
I
cover.
think it's like
any-
$1,000.
Yeah, it
next to
doesn't cover
nothing.
anything.
That's not much, you know.
No.
2014.
So we need
So-
to have a meeting.
So that's okay if
figure out what needs to be done, throw a dollar sign on it.
Yeah.
And then figure out a schedule and how we're gonna budget the money to do it and do it.
Right.
Possible.
Priorities, you know, we gotta prioritize.
So do we want to have a contractor of some degree at a meeting with the building, or
I think we
Because-
need to get a list of what needs to be done.
I think a contractor,
who should,
then
well,
talk to
who
the
should
contractor.
create that list? Because what I see that
Right.
should get done is gonna be different than what you see.
Yeah,
I just
think it
think a
needs to be
contractor
somebody
can
who-
complicate that too,
Well,
because then that same person,
Not necessarily a contractor, but
I think you make a list and then you have a contractor go in and just say, okay,
yeah, these are our concerns, you know,
Yeah.
because
these are our
you
concerns.
get a
we
contractor to
see.
look at it, and then that same person's gonna also wanna bid on it,
and they
or give an
can't,
estimate, and they have prior knowledge that other contractors don't. That,
right.
unless the person is solely, no, I'm just a consultant, I'm gonna look at it, I'm gonna give you
Well,
my
there we
opinion.
go, that's
He
better
doesn't
for
wanna
a
do any work.
consultant, we should get a consultant.
He must be retired.
I mean, I don't wanna overcomplicate it, but that's,
Right, that's exactly,
You can request a home inspector to come in and do the inspection of the building and then refer it to contractors.
Yeah, that's
Right.
right,
The
yeah.
home inspector will tell you what's wrong with the building.
Right.
It's their job.
true.
yeah,
And they have no financial gain out of it.
that's true. You'd have
So you
to,
have to pay
pay
them
them to do their inspection.
Like they say.
Yeah.
But they would know the codes, they would know violations like that,
Right, your public code.
that we're not gonna know that.
Yeah, I don't know any of the public codes, or the handicap accessible stuff is a pain. I know that, but,
All right, well, let's,
okay, all right,
let's
so
at
we'll,
least do a meeting.
a meeting at a building, and
Yeah,
we'll,
so, your timetable for that?
we'll do
You
one,
wanna start like one a month?
yeah, we got what, like 3, but. The post
How many
office is
buildings
easy,
do
we
we
don't
have?
have to go to the post office, because that's easy. We don't have to go here, because we're here.
Weston, North
So-
Westminster, community house.
So it'd just be
Two.
2,
And the town garage.
and the town garage, we should,
The
so.
town garage, we either need to commit to doing something with, or we need to,
Right.
want one right
Well,
now.
and maybe we should start with that one,
That's gonna be a
ish.
large ticket.
Let's start with a small one.
Start with a small one and
Post office would be the easiest, actually.
Well, yeah, we could just go across there and do
That's
it.
what I mean.
All right, we'll start with the
So-
post office, how's that?
Yep,
Okay,
so
all
you
right.
figure out how you wanna put it on the agenda.
Where we're in the lease, Ally, I'm sorry, do you know where we are in the lease in the post office?
That's just ongoing.
Is it
It's like month to month.
month to month?
Yeah, they
Or
pay us,
annually?
they pay us, last I knew it was 800 and change a month. We pay their taxes and they reimburse us when we write a letter stating we need the taxes, $2,200.
Right, but there's no long-term commitment from the feds?
It was in place when I got here. I didn't think they were going anywhere,
Can we check on that?
Yep.
Thank you, Ally.
Uh,
Yeah, they're,
If we wanna talk, let's just talk about that post office. Shortly after the manager had got done, I had a conversation with the postmaster at the time, and there was some deficiencies at that time, and she told me that the way that the postal service works at is they write a letter of what needs to be done to the landlord, which would have been the town. They have so many days, I think she said 30 days, to acknowledge that there's a problem and or fix it. If you don't, then the postal service fixes it and sends you the bill. And that's what happened there. There was a door that was broken and the floor was, so it never got fixed. The postal service fixed it, came back here, and it turned into kind of
Now I remember.
big bill?
well, I don't even think it was the bill. I think it turned into a confrontation that didn't need to
Yeah,
happen.
that should have happened.
Yeah.
So I think that there probably are still some deficiencies there. It needed to be painted. They painted it, I think, last summer, I thought.
Yep. Finished it last summer.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So that's an easy building because it's fairly small.
Yeah.
It's fairly
We'll start
close
with that
by.
one, so then you can ease into it, Dan.
And it's being used, so
Right.
it's not like it's,
Right.
It's bringing in money.
And we
It
have,
brings,
we have,
it's one of our profitable buildings.
Right.
yeah,
Why it's important.
exactly. And
That
we
may
have,
be,
we have keys to get in there after hours, or
no.
no?
No,
So
we'd have to check with
We'd
them.
have to check with them, okay.
I would check with them and have them write you, hey, we're part of our plan, what are your needs and wants that you know of?
Right,
Yeah,
And
let's,
yeah,
we can look at it from the outside, we definitely can't get in.
right,
you need to, just, they
right,
need to
that
tell
would
us.
be,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's easy. Tell us what you
I
need.
totally forgot about that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
All right,
Unbelievable.
okay. Are we good?
Yeah,
Moving on?
good.
All right.
So,
Final approval for fiscal year 24 wage increases.
That's Kevin.
Oh, that's
wanted
Kevin?
it on the, Kelly
Okay,
told me Kevin wanted it on the agenda.
okay,
This
just
is,
to make sure that it's on the agenda, that folks
okay.
know that we've approved it, and, there's nothing wrong with doing it more than once.
Okay.
Okay,
this is cost of living.
the 8%
Increases.
increase?
This is the COLA increase, yeah.
Yep, the 8%, okay, all right,
So we don't,
that's it? Okay, that was easy,
okay.
all right.
Well, I want to make sure that we're affirming, given our prior authorization, approval under the COLA increase with prior approval for FY '24 wage increases. And I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement, that we've approved it and that we're moving forward with it.
All right.
Okay, yeah, that's what we approved
It's
for the
already been
budget.
approved, so.
Yep,
Okay?
okay. Certification of highway roads and bridge standards.
We have the certification of compliance for town road and bridge standards. It's an annual thing. I believe it's so we can get our state aid. And so I'll make a motion to accept the certification of compliance for town road and bridge standards and network inventory dated May 10th, 2023.
And second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the certification of compliance for town road and bridge standards and network inventory. Any discussion?
I'll just have a discussion. It basically states that we have adopted the minimum requirements for a state-approved template dated June 5th, 2019. Pretty standard. So,
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No, okay. Town manager search committee update. Do you want me to speak or?
Yep.
Okay. So we've contracted with Municipal Resources, Inc., and they have posted, they're working on posting the ad. There was a list that I had brought at one meeting, to their recommended venues. The ICYM, which I can't remember what it stands for, and, I always forget that one. VLCT, the New Hampshire Municipal,
Yeah, Massachusetts, Maine.
Massachusetts, Maine, and I think they were gonna do Rhode Island. We have to figure out which newspaper we wanna put it in, correct? So I don't know, do we wanna have that discussion about which newspaper, or do you want the committee to do that?
does anybody read a newspaper?
Well, yeah.
When I have been forwarding you information, you and Chris, have you been sending that to MRI? You have?
So, yeah,
Okay.
and, so we have had some resumes come in, but they're not ideal candidates. So they are, MRI will respond to them for us, and they will, if there's anything that looks like it deserves further investigation, or follow-up, they will forward it back to us and let us know. I can certainly, like the stuff that Ally got, I can certainly share with you, but
About how many do we have right now?
there were
Now there's seven.
seven. One of them wanted more money than we had in our budget. 2 or 3 people had no experience. One person hasn't kept a job more than a year.
Since 2005.
Since 2005. So
Let's not go there.
they were easy no's. So it's still a work in progress, but hopefully within the next couple weeks, we'll have more stuff. So, I don't.
When MRI throws that out there, does that have, a salary?
It has a range
And
on
that,
it.
like a range?
Yeah, it has, it's 73 to 94.
Base to, if they have, it's the base, it's in our budget, adding financial
Right.
They have
to
that.
it.
The high end is if you have the financial to fill the two positions in one, essentially.
Gotcha.
And then I think when people respond to their ads, it will go directly to them, so then we don't have to do the email.
I think our VLCT ad that
Will
I
probably
uploaded,
come.
I think that expired today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
So then they'll take over from here.
And, yeah, I think that's where we're at right now. We're waiting. Right?
Always waiting.
Always waiting.
We're very patient.
Right? Any other questions? Sorry.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Town manager's report.
The trailer is gone. Dave Gorham picked that up.
Right, mark it off the list.
It's
Right?
done.
Yay!
It's only been like a year.
I see Pauline
No, I did
is out there, but I can speak on it if,
Oh,
we have Paul's pest control coming, we think it's ants in her office, in her windowsills.
They were there, same, wasn't it,
Yeah.
like last year too, Pauline?
How do I unmute her?
I think she can unmute hers.
I'm not sure.
Do I unmute?
Yeah, I think if you go, there you go.
Look at that.
Alright.
So good.
It's probably double the damage that it was last year. I mean, there's piles in between the windows. There's piles behind the Indian shutters and it's much worse than it had been.
Yeah, so Paul answered my phone call, said he'll get here as soon as he can. He remembers the problem. I think it was 2 years ago we had this issue as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but he knows he thinks it's ants again.
Yeah.
So we're on that. Ants are eating the building.
Yay.
All right. I called Brennan. Do I mute her again? Or it doesn't matter, right? Okay, so the wall in the town clerk's office is shifting. So if you see like the cracks up in here, it's really bad down there. And I called Brennan, I've got no phone call back. So I asked Cole to check it out. Cole did come in. We've been playing phone tag, so I don't know what his recommendation is for that. We don't know if the vault,
Looks like the weight
being
of the
all
wall is.
concrete, is falling in, or I don't know. I don't know what should be falling in. Oh, go ahead, Pauline.
No, I was just thinking, I don't know whether it's shifting or falling in or moving away from
Right.
the wall structure, but it's pretty prominent.
Yeah,
There's
it's
movement right there, yeah.
Yeah.
for sure. So I'm working on that for you folks. So I have some good news. Westminster School District was given over $2 million for fiscal year 2023. Final cash flow states that they owe us $39,654.77 back. Bells Falls Union High School was given over $1.1 million for fiscal year 2023. They owe us back $16,593.14 to the tune of $56,247.91 going back into our tax revenue line, which is excellent.
Yep.
Excellent.
That is good news.
That is good news.
And the audit letter is in you folks' packet. There's 2 of them. Nothing is jumping out at us. I think we've done really well for the transition and the whole, everything that's happened in the past year. And I want everyone to know that the audit, all 61 pages for the town and all 15 pages for the fire district will be available at Town Hall on request. If anyone's interested in reading that wonderful material.
It seemed like most of the deficiencies in here, they're all, it's the same
Yes, over and over.
year.
Right.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions for Ally?
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, road foreman's report. So Chuck called me from the road. The highway department went to Barry today. There's an annual municipal highway department gathering every year.
Trade show.
Trade show kind of thing. So they went there today and he wasn't sure he was gonna make it back. So his road foreman's report is, lines were painted on roads today. I haven't driven around a lot in town, but I did see some fresh paint. He is working with Westminster Cares, Chris Harlow, and VLCT to create a wood bank for the firewood that the highway department creates, trimming roadsides and taking down trees and stuff like that. He said that the select board would not really have to have any involvement. Westminster Cares is going to oversee the project, once it's established, Westminster Cares is going to oversee it. And they're gonna have volunteers that cut up the firewood and distribute stuff like that. Chris Harlow, it's gonna be on his land. And he's going through all the legal liability aspect things with VLCT. So that, I don't have.
So this is where they pick up all the wood and give it away? People?
Yeah, like what they do in like Putney.
I had, the concern I had before your last sentence
Sorry.
was the cutting, it was taxpayer cutting and splitting of wood on town property, meaning the liability behind that. If Chris is going through that on his own land,
Yes.
that's, I have no issue with that. I was a little concerned with
On town land.
people
Yep.
chainsawing and splitting their wood, and then we gotta,
Nope, there's designated people for that.
okay, I feel better about that.
So he'll probably have more detail than the little bit that I got from him.
And that's a good use of it. There's a couple people in Putney that do the same thing. I can't remember their names, and they distribute it to people that want it, need it, whatever.
Yeah, and there's a church in Dummerston that does a similar thing.
It takes a lot of.
Well, Putney's highway department does
Bills
a thing
from
like this.
Westminster Cares.
That's a nice thing.
Let's see, going through my notes. Chuck came in second in the backhoe competition at the municipal thing. They looked at a bunch of different equipment while they were there. One was an asphalt reclaimer that they could use to patch road for maintenance. They were talking with people about, I think the next things on our equipment purchase list are a backhoe and another truck, correct?
No, the backhoe is only a couple of years old.
We just
No.
bought it.
Was it the loader? I
I
didn't make good notes.
believe so.
So he was getting prices on that, on those. Yes, it's the loader. Because some places have the loader but don't have buckets, and so it might be, the lead time on those might be a long time out too. He's working on getting proposals for the catch basins in Gageville. He's reached out to a bunch of people, but a lot of them are busy and there's not a lot of interest yet. Next week, they're going to be picking up the used guardrails from Cold River that are going to be installed on Piggery Road. And Green Up Day had a lot more tires than normal. They had 2 single axle dump truck loads of tires. But other than that, that was.
Tires on Greenup, they are a systemic problem.
Yes, they are.
They don't just end up over the bank, they come out of people's sheds.
Yes, they do.
As well. It's just what it is. Some years are wicked bad and some years are.
That's exactly what he said.
And paint cans.
And paint it, yes.
Where do you get rid of them?
Well, we
He
would
took,
pay to get rid of a cheaper tire.
yeah,
Someone's tire.
he took them to Pete's Tire because it was
No, they're better.
it was a
They're
better,
They may not be taken.
Pete's was cheaper than our own recycling.
yeah, than our own recycling center, so,
I got a bunch of them.
yeah.
Just throw them
There
outside
was
the
a
door.
lot of them,
Yeah, cleanup day. The bad ones.
It happens, I'm telling you.
right?
It happens.
So, you can ask me questions about the road foreman's report, but I can't answer them, so.
The only comment I have on that is loader purchasing.
Yeah,
We've been through it before. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I totally get that,
of the DEF,
you know, the stuff we have, that loader is, the two loaders are pre-emissions. The new ones are gonna cost a lot more money.
right,
I have all that stuff. It costs a lot of money to keep it going. It'll never last the 20 years that we're getting, 25 years out of the ones we have now. My personal feeling is I think we should look at the one in the yard, on this yard here, sending oil samples out and possibly look at putting some money into it and run it another 10 years, 10 or 15 years. But I get it that we should stay on a schedule that we've been on, and I'm conflicted with it. And I don't do that, in my own life. But that's my own money,
right.
you know, and,
It's not everybody else's, yeah.
well, yeah, I just don't know if that's a good use. I mean,
Well, and-
everything now in the last 5 years is now all emissions. The tractor, the grass head mower is emissioned, the excavator's not, the backhoe is. I don't think the grader is, but that stuff just costs, once the warranty is out of it, it costs a lot of money to keep it going.
Yeah.
It just does.
Yep,
I mean, and I don't mean hundreds, I mean thousands of dollars
yeah.
to keep it going.
Yeah,
And it's fine, you just have to know that going into it.
right. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what the lead time is, you know, if
The
it's,
inventory's gotten a lot better.
So maybe
The
it's
stuff's
not that.
back, but you're gonna pay, compared to what we paid for that loader, I bet you pay $100,000 more. for that-
oh,
for a
probably,
new one.
I would agree. So.
A
Okay,
lot of money.
all right. I don't think we need an executive session.
Yes, you know.
All right, boards, committees, and commissions.
Oh, it's a TV in the background.
Oh.
I think it's mommy TV.
Other business?
The only thing I have on other business, I think we need to get going, we need to do reviews. We need to get going on reviews.
Yeah, it fell off the radar.
I've-
Well, kind of,
I'm going into year 3, and I don't think we've seen any reviews other than a manager review in there
Right.
somewhere, so,
right,
like official reviews,
An
like,
official, yeah.
you had the paperwork for it there one time. What do you call that?
That's still executive session, that was special training.
No, you had the review form.
Oh, yeah, I have the form,
Like, what's
sure.
that called, where it's a numeric, like.
Scoring.
Scoring. Yeah.
We have to decide also, and I think using Jill Muir from VLCT as a guidepost, with her expertise, how we want to go about the scoring system. In other words, you know, and I'm just saying this real quick, through all my years in private practice, well, that's what we did, right? The person being scored has to have the right to also score themselves. You know, I think that's important. Just because we were talking about that, and I think, you know, that person has to be able to score themselves, and then their peers score them separately. So we do have to come up with an agreed scoring mechanism. I think your conversation with Jill probably would be good, but I have all the documents. I'll bring them to the next meeting.
Okay,
You got it. I'll make the copies for everybody.
okay, all right. Anything
And I'll
else?
make them for you too, Ellen.
I appreciate that, Kevin.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right, Date of next meeting, Wednesday, May 24th, 2023.
When is Memorial Day?
It is the following Monday.
29.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Stephen will not be at the May 24th meeting.
I'll be there, I think.
Okay. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made, and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.